Yo, yo, yo. I'm Candy, and I be knitting. This is Candy Be Knittin'. And obviously, I am wearing, or maybe not obviously to you if you've never watched me before, but I am wearing a finished object. Um, Last week, I showed y'all my finished Audrey shawl, and I was working these shawls in tandem, and so I have now finished my Exploration Station by Stephen West. And rather than do a back to back deep dive episodes, next time y'all see me, I'll do a pattern deep dive where I give my final thoughts about this pattern and tell you all about the yarn I used, what my final gauge was, etc., etc., etc. But this week, I thought I would tell y'all or talk to y'all about what I do or what I think about like once I finish a project, because obviously I had these two big shawls I was working on, and it happens to me like with books, with a good movie, with a good show. I think most people call it like the book hangover. Like once like you're immersed in this world and you've, gotten familiar with the characters and you hope it never ends, but you just can't stop turning the pages, and then it's done and you're just like, now what? Like I want to sit and I want to reflect on what I just did, but then also I'm so, juiced up. I want to read something new, but also this book was so good that nothing could possibly compare to the experience I just had. And same thing happens with my knitting. I get into projects, I zero in on them, and it becomes my whole world. Even if I'm not knitting on it, I'm thinking about it. And so, this past week has been kind of like the now what. And so obviously I'm like, what's my next big project going to be? And also let me kind of button up some other projects I'm working on. So first thing I want to show y'all is not a finished object. It is almost finished. I've washed and blocked it. The only thing that's missing is a pom-pom, and literally the only thing stopping me from knitting a pom-pom is the pom-pom makers I do own are too small, and so I'm gonna have to like fashion one out of cardboard, and I just don't feel like doing that. But this is a bulky weight hat that I knitted. I just cast on 64 stitches, and I did a color work motif out of a Stitch a Day calendar I have. And this is the yarn I'm going to use for the pom-pom. So this contrast color is a Stitch and Story yarn that I dyed with Kool-Aid. And then the gray is a Patton's bulky. And so literally all I have to do is this, make the pom-pom, sew the pom-pom on. Have I done it? No. Does anyone need this hat right now in Virginia? No. It's going to go in my donate/gift pile. My 6-year-old looked at it and she's like, that's very soft. I will see if it fits me. And I'm just like, we'll see. So, kind of buttoning up small projects. Then I was just like, what else do I want to work on? I briefly pulled out this yarn. Speaking of my 6-year-old, this is some Cascade Heritage. I got 2 skeins of Cascade Heritage from a yarn swap, and it's sold as sock yarn, but it's like super plump and really soft. So I was thinking, since the sweater that I knit for my 6-year-old got kind of felted and the colors ran on it, I wanted to knit her something else. And since I know what this is and I know that it's machine washable, I was thinking about, since I got 2 skeins, I think this is enough to make her a vest, which is actually pretty practical for how my kids dress. And I was like, oh, that'd be nice. And then I can work on it over the summer, and she can have it for like back to school, and she can have like something kind of lightweight that she can wear in like the fall transitional periods. So that was something I considered. Then I caked up some yarn. This is Knitted Wit Sock and Wood Violet, and I've been wanting to make myself a sockhead hat, and it's a free pattern, really slouchy hat. And I realized that I've been knitting really nice lightweight hats for everyone but myself, and so this was an option. I have since decided that I want to wait until I finish these socks I've been working on. So I finished this whole sock. I've got one more. It's almost done, and then I'm going to cast this on. So this is kind of on hold. I've got a trip coming up with my kids, and so I think this will be a nice portable kind of low stakes project to take with me. These are the Rye Socks by TinCanKnits, and I'm holding fingering weight yarn double. And so I didn't bring the other sock that I'm working on with me, but I'm pretty close to finishing the foot on the second sock. And so probably next time you see these will be done, and I will have cast on these. Then I was just like, okay, what else can I make? What else can I do? And I mentioned that I wanted to make myself an apron out of some cotton yarn. And so I did cast on the Pie Maker apron, and this is a free pattern by Jennifer Lysene, and it's worsted weight cotton. And I'm pretty much like, I could knock this out, but I kind of started blazing through it because I finished my other big projects, and so now I'm kind of like, I'm gonna let this marinate for a second. This is that sugar and cream cotton yarn my friend got me, and this is Fleur de Lavande, which I'm assuming means lavender flower. And this is actually sugar and cream scented, which, fair warning, the scent is quite strong. When I got the balls, I was like, oh, this is the scented one. I smelled it, and I was like, it doesn't smell that strong. Maybe it's like an older ball. And then I did a center pull, and then that's when all the fragrance came out. So I am not personally sensitive to fragrances, but if you are, just be warned. I think this is going to work out really nice. I think it fades as you wash the item, but for something that's going to be in my kitchen, it'll be nice to have something that kind of smells good in my kitchen. But just be warned that the scent is quite strong. But you cast on, you knit, you cast on, and then you do some decreases for the ruffle down here, and then you get to like a certain length and you start to cast on stitches for the belt of the apron. And so I really don't have that much. I have like a few more inches in the body to go, and then I have to do the belt, and the belt will be a long piece of garter stitch. But I also can't work on cotton for long periods of time, so I kind of went like ham on this, and I just need a little break from this. So what else do I do? What's missing from my repertoire? And so I'm just like, I kind of need my next like big project, like something that is kind of complex, a little bit bigger, something I can focus on. And the last time we met, we talked about how, the time before last time we met, we talked about my Audrey shawl, but we talked about how, what did we talk about? Completely blanked. Oh, we talked about my sweaters, and I was showing you all the sweaters I knit for myself, and I realized something when we were doing that is I have a tendency of casting on sweaters for myself in the winter, and then I can only wear them like a few weeks, and then I have to wait the next year to really wear them. And so I always have these sweaters straddling the new year. And so I was like, why don't I just cast on a sweater now? And I have plenty of time, and the minute it gets cold, like even if I take a million breaks, I can knit a sweater for myself. And we were in late April, so 6 to 7 months before it even gets chilly here. I think that's what's up. And so I made a swatch. And so one of the things going into this year I was thinking about is I have a lot of sock yarn. I have a lot of variegated sock yarn, and I love sock yarn. The sock yarn in particular we're talking about is this Lion brand Sock Ease that I bought a bunch of because it was discontinued, and then they brought it back. And so I literally bought 2 balls of every single color they had. This is the bramble color, and then I have the aviation colorway. And so I have 2 balls of this and 2 balls of this, and they are very much, goodness. Of course oh, because it's connected to a ball of mohair, that's why. Um, like cousins of one another. This one has a lot more navy blue, and this one has a little bit more of light blue and oranges, but they definitely go together. And so my thought was I could combine them in some project, and 4 balls is enough to make a sweater for myself. And one of the tips I got from another YouTuber was like, hey, I'm not a big like combine mohair with projects because that is just more yarn I have to buy. But they were just like, that's a good way of doing mohair held with a yarn or whatever fluffy yarn you have. If you have variegated yarns like this, it kind of makes it all blurry so that the colors look like they even more so go together. And you get less of that, like, you know, sometimes you get that flashing and that pooling of variegated yarns. It kind of softens all of that. And so I was just like, okay, I'll hold my variegated sock yarn with a solid color yarn because I don't have that much mohair. And so I pulled out, I have 2 skeins of this. This is Jaeger spun, and this is a wool silk lace weight yarn. It's 100 grams is 1,120 yards, and I have 2 balls of these. And this is from when the only thing I would look at was yardage. I didn't really think about like, what am I going to do with a silky lace weight yarn? And so my thought was to hold this double with the variegated sock yarn. And so I was going to swatch with that. And then same place I got the Cascade from, I went to a yarn swap. And someone was getting rid of this Lighthouse Beacon mohair. And it's 50% mohair, 50% acrylic. And I was kind of nervous because I was like, oh, this might be like really weird and itchy, you know, acrylic mohair blend. But it was a yarn swap, and so it was free. And so I'm just like, if I take it with me, if I don't like it, I can always just bring it to another yarn swap and give it away. And so my idea was I was going to swatch with this and swatch with this and see which one I liked better. And so I did swatch. I started with swatching the mohair because my idea is that I wanted to make the Silver Bells by TinCanKnits. I got the pattern for free when they were doing their fundraiser for their app. If you donated to the fundraiser, you got a free pattern, and Silver Bells was the free pattern. And so I have this pattern. I was like, okay, that'll be my 2025 hand knit sweater for myself. And so this is my swatch with the mohair with the variegated Lion Brand yarn held together. And I literally swatched, I knit with the mohair just to see. I've knit once with, I did knitting for Olive soft silk mohair held double with a worsted weight yarn, and that worked out fine. But this is, like I said, that 50% acrylic, 50% mohair. And so I swatched with it, one, to see if it was going to be annoying to work with. Not annoying at all. You know, you always run the risk of not catching a second strand of yarn when you're knitting double, but I really didn't have any big problems. My gauge is a little tight, but the pattern calls for positive ease. So I think in the end, it's going to be like a perfect fit because I don't like my sweaters too big. It did grow a little bit. It shrank this way and grew this way with blocking though, so it might all work out. So I wanted to see how it felt. I wanted to see what the experience was like working with, and also this pattern calls for bobbles, and I've never done bobbles before, but they also have an option in the pattern that you can skip the bobbles if you want to. So I was like, I'll give the bobbles a try too, and so when I get into the pattern, I can see if I like bobbles. And it wasn't that big of a deal. I'm happy I practiced though, because I actually read somewhere that you should go down a needle size on bobbles so that they're, you know, kind of tight and perky. But I kind of played around with that, and I try to be really relaxed in my tension when I'm knitting, because I do know I knit a little bit tighter than a lot of patterns call for. But at the same time, I think I needed to tighten up on my bobble. So I have like this one that's like super loosey-goosey, and I have this one that's just a little bit tighter because I tightened up my tension there. So I think this is going to be a nice experience for me. And this I swatched in the round, so I just left a big loop in the back because I can always undo this and use this yarn if I need it. So I had so much fun swatching that I decided to cast on the silver bells, and this is my silver bells so far. It calls for a folded neckline, so you start with the neckline, you knit it, then you fold it over, and then you start knitting the sweater. So I literally just finished the neck, and then now I'm going to start the lace chart with some increases and all that stuff. So it's a circular yoke with lace and baubles in the yoke, and so you can't tell that by looking at this. But so far so good. I started with the bramble colorway because it's a bit lighter, and I think what's going to happen is I did solid up here. Oh, not solid. I did one colorway of this here in the cuffs, and I think I'm going to do one colorway of the cuffs and the neck and the bottom hem. But then when I get into the body, I'm going to start striping this so that it kind of seamlessly blends, and it makes it look like even more so that these two things go together. So I think that's going to be nice for me. This is going to be like it is like a circular yoke lace pattern. I'm going to have like stitch markers coming out the wazoo. And so I was just like, okay, now I need kind of like a background project, because this is going to be like I need to focus and read a lace chart pattern. And so I was like, okay, what else do I got going on? I don't feel like knitting a cotton apron. I got my socks that I have certain sock time for. I'm taking the hat on a trip with my kids. What else do I got? Have not found a vest pattern for my kids. I'm very picky with sweater vest, and I'm like, maybe it's like the vest thing versus the slip over thing, but I'm like always like, I need to find like the perfect vest or slip over pattern. So y'all remember I had that blanket that I was working on, big old bulky weight blanket, and I was just like, a blanket would be like the perfect thing to be working on right now in the background. And I put the blanket away for a couple of weeks, and just as for a reminder, I've got this bulky weight blanket. I put it away for a couple of weeks to see if I was just in a bad mood. Then I pulled it back out, started knitting on it again, and I was like, no, I still hate this. Like, I am completely mentally well, and in my logical brain, I hate this. I've got this, oh great, I got all these things connected to one another. I've got this mystery yarn plus some superwash knit picks bulky that I'm using, and this just I was telling y'all about the thick metal needles clacking together. I wasn't liking the gauge I was getting. It was just getting heavier and heavier and heavier, and I'm just like, I think I'm gonna rip it out. And I was just like, maybe I should power through. I was like, nah, I don't want to power through this. I don't like it. So I was like, this is getting frogged. But what can I work on in the meantime? And remember, I said that this was going to be for my sister-in-law who asked for a blanket. And so I pulled out, which this was going to be another option too to finish the blanket, because I remember I was kind of nervous about yarn quantities. I was like, well, I can't be nervous about yarn quantities because I have a lot of yarn. So I pulled out these 4 skeins of Lion Brand homespun that I have in my stash, and I was like, 4 balls of homespun should get a relatively decent sized blanket. So I went to the Lion Brand website, and they have on their website, you pick a yarn and they'll tell you what patterns, and they have free patterns that go with their yarn. And I came across, it's called like the Happy Baby Blanket. I'll put the exact name of it in the comments or the description. And it's a baby blanket that's made with homespun. You need 3 colors of homespun, 2 of a main color, and 1 each of a contrast color. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what I have. And I pulled up the pattern, and it's mitered squares, and they were like, you can do the mitered squares and you can join them as you go, or you can knit them separate and sew them together. And I was just like, okay, bet. And then they were like, then I was looking at the pattern, and I was just like, one of the big problems I had with this was metal needles, and right now all I have are metal needles. I have, this is like from my Chalgu interchangeable set. And I remembered I have some straight metal needles, which actually came with, this was the Stitch and Story yarn I got in a kit, and the kit came with these thick wooden needles. And at first they seemed impractical, so I just kind of kept them because they were cute in my yarn room, not necessarily to use them, but they're 10 millimeter needles. And I was like, oh, that's perfect for like a bulky weight blanket. And if I knit it on straight needles and I'm knitting it in pieces to seam, this is perfect for that. If you're knitting a big blanket, you need like the long cord, but if I knit it in pieces, I can do it on here. And so I was just like, you know what? Why don't I give this yarn one more try on these needles? Because the story with this Knit Picks yarn, this blanket will be the second thing it got ripped out of. I made a jacket out of this, and I didn't like it, and I ripped it out. And so I was just like, oh, make it into a blanket. And now the blanket's not working out. And I was like, let me give third strike on this yarn, because now it's personal. And so I did a swatch of those two yarns held together, and this gauge is a lot better. Like I said, these are 10 millimeter, which I think are size 12. Don't get me the line, but they're 10 millimeter, and these are actually 10 millimeter might be a size 15. Oh my God. And then these are size 11, which are 8 millimeters. So yeah, these are size 15. These are size 11. So much more relaxed, much more open gauge. And I think knitting these in pieces and then seaming them together is going to be the move for this. So that way I can have just this little project that's kind of, I don't have to think too much about, and then I can carry it around in my bag. And they're mitered squares. And so with mitered squares, you knit on a bunch of stitches, and then you're decreasing this way, and you're bringing the sides together to make a square. And so if I just kind of keep in that pattern, I'm going to get perfect squares every time. Like if you do a garter stitch, you have to, I'm like constantly measuring, like, oh, is that a square? Is that a square? Is that a square? With the mitered squares, it's going to be a square, assuming that your gauge is relatively reasonable. So that's that. I'm pretty excited about that. So that's kind of where my brain has been at the past like week or two. It's kind of just been chaos in the yarn room. Like this is what happens every single time I end a project. I start pulling out yarn, pulling out patterns, trying to figure out what's going to happen next. What about you? What happens when you finish a project? Do you feel like, wow, it's a relief that is over, I can move on to something else? Or you're like, oh man, I kind of miss working on that. Or, oh, what do I do? Who am I? Where am I? You just turn into Jackie Chan, I guess. Let me know. I'm Candy B. I be knitting. You can hit me up on Ko-fi, Blue Sky, Ravelry, Instagram. You can email me candybknittin@gmail.com. Tune in next time so you can find out all of the drama with my Crunchwrap Supreme. Until next time, peace.